Hello and welcome to EduAdvisor's webinar series where we speak to industry experts, professionals and academicians of various backgrounds to give you key insights about their professions. I'm Mia and I'll be your host for this session today, and we'll be talking about the study of computer science. Thanks for tuning in. Today we have Mr. Josh Tang, who is here to share with us about making big bucks with skills in programming and computer science. So before we begin, a little background about our speaker today. Josh Tang is the founder of Next Academy and honored top 40 under 40 by Prestige Malaysia in 2019. Josh is a technologist and educator by heart. He strongly believes that we live in a golden generation of wealth creation where anyone who has the skills in technology to be highly primed for success even without connections or a huge capital to start. So Josh, aside from being a seasoned entrepreneur, he is also a software developer, building a wide variety of software from consumer applications to AI financial markets trading algorithms. He believes in knowledge sharing to give as many people an opportunity to enjoy the spoils life has to offer. So before we continue, if you have any questions for Mr. Josh Tang, do leave a message at the comment section at the end of the session. So let's just begin. So first question, Mr. Tang. To start, in your own words, what is the study of computer science, and is it different from IT and software engineering?
Okay, so computer science is basically the study of computers and computer systems, right? But let me elaborate. So think of physics as the study of, say, objects and how objects relate to one another, and say biology as the study of living organisms. Computer science is the study of computers, right? Specifically software. So in computer science, you would study two main things. Number one is what are the problems suited for a computer to solve? And on top of that, you study maybe like how complex would the problem be for a computer to solve. So that's one part of computer science. The other part is learning how to develop software for computers. So for example, I think these days, everyone pretty much has a smartphone, right? So smartphone is essentially a computer, but it's basically both hardware and software. Right, so computer engineers would study hardware, right? How do you design the hardware? How do you make it, more powerful, last longer? And then you have software, which is basically, when you interact with the phone, all of that is basically software. Yeah, so computer science is basically the study of, software, what problems can you solve with it, and how to actually build, software. To make it work.
Is it different from IT and software engineering?
Yes. So IT to me feels like a very old-fashioned terminology.
Okay.
But I guess IT is sort of like very broad. It basically encompasses everything related to technology. But most of the times when you see job descriptions, IT is very much related to very close to the end user. So what I mean by that is think of the production of technology as a funnel or as a journey, right? So here you have the R&D guys. These guys are doing research. They are really at the cutting edge of developing new hardware and new software. And then you have the manufacturers or the developers. So these are the guys that are building software that ultimately we would use, as consumers or businesses. And then you have consultants. So this could be, let's say you wanted to set up an office with 1,000, employees, right? So when we talk about 1,000 employees, maybe they have 1,000 laptops, 1,000 smartphones, right? So obviously, let's say you wanted to set up like a network to support 2,000 devices. It's going to be very different from setting up a network for your house.
Yes.
Right? And so basically a network professional categorized as IT would go to these offices, maybe buy hardware from manufacturers, right? So this part of the funnel, and then they would implement, the hardware. So they don't actually make their own hardware or software. They are more like implementers.
Right.
Yeah, so they act as consultants. So I feel like when we talk about IT, we really refer to people like this. Not just networking, but it could be SAP, for example, is a very popular job role. So SAP consultant, SAP is a software, right? And this software can do a lot of things. It's actually a very complex software. So SAP consultants will go to companies and help companies, look at how they do certain processes, how do they manage maybe like employee payrolls, how do they manage like leaves. So this SAP professionals will go in, train, implement, and teach the company how to use SAP. So IT professionals, I feel like it's sort of more on this end of the spectrum.
Right.
These guys they're knowledgeable with technology, but not so much on the creation, but on the usage of technology.
Yeah.
When it comes to software engineering, so computer science can be very theoretical, especially the part where we are talking about, studying whether, like computers are suited to solve a particular problem. That's very, very theoretical. I suppose, software engineering as a term became very popular because computer science grew a lot in the past 8 decades. We have had computers since, probably 9 decades, right? So obviously computers today are very different from computers in the past. And so software engineering came about to sort of differentiate, the pure theoretical study and the more application, like actually building software. So software engineering tends to imply building of software. Computer science tends to imply the study of algorithms, problems, whether they are suited for computers. But having said that, it's very confusing because when you go to any university, at least in the past 1-2 years, what I've seen with university curriculums, they only really differ by 2 or 3 subjects, computer science and software engineering. So I think like for people making a choice between computer science and software engineering, you would probably want to, take a deeper look into the subject. Does it really differ by much? If it doesn't differ by much, my suggestion is to always pick computer science over software engineering. Because when you go to other countries, software engineering is not exactly a very popular degree. Computer science is.
Is it because computer science is more theoretical? So in a sense, it's more general, it's broader than it is software engineering?
It definitely is broader. But from what I've seen in other countries in general, they tend to value the name computer science more than software engineering, and that's why I think like computer science has a better name to it than software engineering. But having said that, like at the end of the day, the subjects are going to be very similar. So your learning, your knowledge may be very similar as well.
Okay, that's actually really good. It's a lot going on in the world of the world of computer science itself. But that's a lot of information to digest. But what made you decide to pursue this field? And were you always a computer enthusiast?
So I'm an 80s kid, which means I sort of like transition, between things. Everything was very physical, like everything you want to do, like you've got to go to the store, and slowly over time, like in the 90s, we started getting smartphones, like, those like, they call it PDA, right? Personal digital assistant. So that was a time when handheld computing devices started appearing, and I was always a big sort of like gadget freak. Like I like the coolest phone, like, and at that point in time, like phones, we talk about megapixels and stuff like that, and then cameras as well. So I was always a big fan of like technology, gadgets per se. But I think as I grew up, what I realized was instead of being a consumer of technology, like I was spending so much money on like gadgets and stuff like that, and it's expensive even till today. Like phones, we're talking about what it's a crazy amount. It's like 6,000 for a phone. It's insane. So rather than just being a consumer, I was thinking, why don't I become a creator of technology, right? So I can not just use the coolest, latest technology, but I can also create it and, like probably like make some money from it.
Yeah.
I think that's what really got me into like creating technology. Yeah.
Have you had any invention during your time back then?
So I've built a lot of things over the years.
Okay.
So I've been doing software development for about 10 years now.
Okay.
I think in the early days, at that point in time, for example, like I think this was like 2011, Groupon was like hot, like everyone was starting a Groupon, so did I.
You're one of those.
Yeah, I'm one of those. So basically, I just built like a simple web application. It's actually very quick to build, something like Groupon. It just took like less than a week. So I built it up, went to different like suppliers and asked them, hey, do you want to sell your products on my website? Yeah, so I think, that was kind of like the first, like startup or first like software that I built. We were very fortunate. Like at that point in time, like, iPhone pretty much dominated the scene. And so Samsung really wanted to increase their market share. So they didn't mind like slashing their prices. So we got Samsung on board. And then after Groupon, the Groupon clone, I won't call it Groupon, there were many other sort of things along the way. Another notable one was like Televate. It was an enterprise software technology. Basically, we linked up to like call centers. So you know how, let's say you lose your credit card or debit card, you would have to go to your computer, Google for the bank's phone number. So basically what we did was we built a plugin on the bank's website itself, where you just leave your phone number, right? And automatically your phone will ring when the next available agent is ready for you. So you don't have to like, navigate that dial tone thing and wait. So that was Televate. It was based in Singapore. It was quite interesting being in the enterprise software space. But a bunch of other things. I think right now, apart from being very focused with Next Academy, we do a lot of R&D related to programmatic trading. So basically, we write software that ingests data. So this can be any kinds of data. It can be data related to weather or related to just like, so when I say trading, I mean trading of, for example, stocks, basically the financial markets. So we write software that would ingest data and find correlation between this data and generating signals for us to buy or sell these financial instruments. So once we have developed this, it trades automatically, and the whole idea is if we can make money in our sleep, why not?
True actually. Okay. So a lot of people say that computer science and programming is hard, and do you think it's difficult? Must you be very comfortable with computers to be able to, be good at math?
So you don't need to be good at math.
Can you elaborate on that?
I don't. So there's a lot of idea behind computer science being like, I think the term itself can be very intimidating. Like it just sounds like, oh, computer science, right? Like you got to be so smart. But the reality is, no, you don't need to be good at math. I think you should at least know how to do like addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And I think what we have found so far with our experience, teaching over 2,000 people, is people who has a strong command of language, human language, tend to do well. Part of that reason is because in programming, logical thinking as well as reasoning is important. So what I mean by logical thinking is, one example would be, let's say you're about to head out of your house and the sky is cloudy, and you take public transportation, you probably want to bring an umbrella out. Right? So it's a very simple example, but basically that's logical thinking, that's reasoning, right? It's reasoning because the sky is dark, it might likely rain.
So you might as well just bring an umbrella where you go out,
Therefore, I don't want to get wet, so I bring an umbrella. So that's reasoning. And what we find is that with programming, that's what you need to be good at. You need to be good with just reasoning. And then when it comes to writing software, it's really about that. It's really about I do this step 1, I do this step 2, do this step 3, something like that.
Right. So it's like having like a smoother effect and transition for you to be able to like make the processor work. Is that it?
Okay, so one example I like to give is, let's say you wanted to cook a dish.
Okay.
Right? So whatever it may be, what is step 1? Step 1 could be pour 500 milliliters of water into a bowl. Step 2 is boil the water. Step 3 is what? Step 4 is what? So if you can do that, you can actually cook.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Alright.
it's all about breaking things down into different steps.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a very simple way to like simplify computer science again.
Yeah.
So when it comes to computer science, a lot of people think app developers. So aside from becoming an app developer, what are some career options that someone can pursue with skills in programming?
Yep. So when we talk about computers are not just our laptops. It's not just our phones. One example is a plane.
Okay.
So I'm sure, to some extent, everyone may have heard of the Boeing 737 MAX situation, right? Last year. Basically, when you think of a plane, you think of the physical object. But at the end of the day, what is powering the plane as well is the software. And Boeing 737 had 2 issues. Number 1 was a design flaw with the propellers. But on top of that, they had, certain software flaws where basically, how do I not get too technical about this? But yeah, I'm thinking like, okay, so a plane flies this way, right? And then physics, basically you generate lift. But when the plane is overly vertical, it basically enters into what they call a stall. So it stalls, and then the plane would just like fall straight down, right? So the problem with the software is basically the software would detect the angle of attack of the plane, and then it would basically make adjustment to the front, the nose of the plane, so that if it's too steep, it would adjust the angle so that the plane would level up. Yeah. The problem with the software was it thinks that it's in a stall, and then and for some reason, you need to fact check this, but basically, I think what happened with the software is it doesn't allow pilots to override the control. And so when it really goes vertical, the pilots cannot override the control, and the plane would just basically crash this way. So yeah, at the end of the day, when we talk about programming, it's really not just about building your iPhone apps, your Android apps, your websites and stuff like that. Software is used in everything computing. This also applies to like agriculture. There are a lot of farmers these days, right? They use some technology, right, to so they have sensors, they monitor, what the weather is like, and then there is software within that computer itself that reads the input from the sensors and then decide whether whether the computer should water the plants or something like that.
Right.
So yeah, I think software is quite broad in that sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, do you think computer science is a good career choice, and is there a high demand for computer science professionals? I guess there seem to be many types of jobs in the digital tech industry.
Yeah.
So, like, what are some of the most in demand profession?
Is software a good field? Obviously, I'm biased. I think, at the end of the day, we need good doctors, we need good lawyers. I was going to say politicians. But let's not get there. I think, like at the end of the day, every field is important. The most important thing is you need to be good at what you do, right? I won't say one is superior over the other. But having said that, I think computer science is good because in the next sort of like 10 years, 20 years, we're going to see technology being infused into more industries. What I mean by infused is basically when you think of transportation companies, let's say you think of taxis, but did you know that the world's largest transportation company owns no cars, nothing? Uber, Grab, right? When we talk about the biggest hotel in the world, or hospitality in general, it's basically a software company that owns no properties, or they own very little properties. So yeah, like Airbnb, right?
Yeah.
So I think software is gonna penetrate even more industries, and that means there are gonna be a lot of opportunities for entrepreneurs, a lot of opportunities for people working as software engineers, right, to actually produce this software. So it's basically a growing industry. So from that sense, I think it's a good sort of thing to be good at.
Yeah, all right, okay. So, are there any particular industries that's constantly on the lookout for programmers and developers?
I don't know of any tech companies that are not constantly looking for good software developers, especially at this point in time, globally and even in Malaysia itself. Any particular industry? Yeah, I have trouble naming a particular industry that is hiring more than other industries. I think in general, most tech companies are maybe raised a lot of money, or existing big tech companies, they have the sort of funds, just to hire the best of the best.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
So, how much money do programmers and computer science professionals make?
Yeah, so I think I'll answer this question, from a Malaysia perspective first. So in Malaysia is a very funny country. The starting pay is always kind of like fixed, and then over time, like salaries just go all over the place. So in general, I find that most sort of like, if it's your first job as a software developer, typically 3,500 to 4,500 is quite common per month, which is on the higher side. I know a lot of people, want even higher, but it is what it is. It is very high compared to many other sort of fields. And then things really change the second, third year onwards.
Right.
So if you are, if you do really well, we start seeing people climb very quickly. So I've seen someone basically in his third year, he started making 10,000 per month.
Oh wow.
But yeah, again, like this could be edge cases, right? Just want to lay out that fact. But at the end of the day, it's like, if you are very good at it, your salary can climb very quickly. In other countries like Singapore, the increase is more linear, right? So Malaysia is a country, not just for computer science, actually, you see a lot of different fields, like the climb is more exponential. Like the starting is low, but it climbs, differently. In Singapore, it's more linear. So like, the starting pay is about 3-5 Sing per month. Then it slowly climbs to like 7-8 over the next 5 to 10 years.
Right.
And then in the US, starting salary is very high. So if you're on the west coast of the US, like California, starting salary is about at least $100,000 per year. But having said that, their tax is really high.
Yeah.
So it's your take home might actually be just 50,000, and then the increased cost of living. So yeah, it looks good on paper, but the reality is a bit different as well.
Alright, okay.
Yep.
So I mean, we know that living in this digital age, programming has changed over the years. I mean, compared to what at 8 decades ago, that how you mentioned earlier. But what do you think are the likely industries that could change in the next 5 to 10 years?
What industries? I think there are a lot of industries that are overlooked. So at the end of the day, majority of us, we don't have the exposure, right, into different industries. Like we may be very familiar with retail because we are all consumers. So retail was obviously one of the first industries to be disrupted with technology. But there are a lot of industries, like for example, let's say oil and gas, logistics, shipping. Like think about your containers and how like when you buy something from China, how does it get efficiently sent over to Malaysia? Like those are more sort of like old school industries that I think, in my point of view, has a lot of potential for technology to just make things better. The key thing is, we just got to go in and really dig deeper into what are the problems that they face, and what are some of the processes that exist, and we can use technology to disrupt.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so some companies like Google and Facebook have relaxed their requirements for a formal degree.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts? Does one really need a degree to be successful, in this field?
Yeah. So I want to answer this question very responsibly, right? Because we are talking about the general population. So I'm going to give an argument for having a degree and an argument not needing a degree.
Okay.
I'll start with not needing a degree. The best salesperson I know does not have a sales degree, does not have a marketing degree. The best musician I know doesn't have like, a bachelor's in like music.
Go to Berkeley or something.
Yeah, correct. So the reality is you don't actually need a degree to become good at something. But having said that, most of the time, these people are very passionate about what they do, very self-driven, very self-motivated. So they spend, even though they don't go to like a formal, like institution to learn the crafts, they spend a lot of time learning on their own, and that's why they really become the best of the best. So yeah, degree not needed in that sense. Now, having a degree, like I think that when it comes to formal education, there's still importance to it. At the end of the day, learning institutions is about giving you an environment, for structured learning. And when I think about formal education, I think about like K-12, right? So we're talking about primary school, secondary, high school, whatever, college. I remember, when I was a kid, obviously like studying is not exactly at the top of my priority list. And I think that's where formal education really comes in, like it's important to get an education. And it's important to have these institutions in place so that at the end of the day, when we come out, to the society to work, we become useful member of the society.
Right.
Not just for the society, but for our own sake as well, so that we can earn a living. So I think a degree sort of gives a good baseline, to ensure that people are well educated, they are able to get jobs. And it also opens up options. Like, let's say you wanted to work in a different country. A lot of times, immigration requirements would always require someone with a degree. So yeah, I think, there's argument for and argument, that you don't need to. My suggestion is always like, nowadays getting a degree is expensive, right? So when you want to pick a degree, you want to pick carefully. I really like sort of enrichment short-term programs where you get to sort of discover the different industries that exist before you really commit 4 years and I don't know, 60,000, 100,000 or hundreds of thousands, for the next 3-4 years, to really sort of maximize the value that you get out of, going to a higher learning institution.
Right. So you believe it's best to like adapt or adopt some of these skills before deciding, just to see if it's best for you and things like that.
To see whether you would like it and to see whether, you have the knack for it.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's a really good tip. So what are the common mistakes that people often make in this industry, and what are the challenges you had to go through that led you to your current position today?
When you say mistake, do you mean technical mistake, career mistake, or?
I guess it's like venturing into courses or venturing into this field. What are things that I guess different areas people have different navigations to things. So when people be in your industry, what are the things that people shouldn't do?
So obviously being an entrepreneur, I always tell people you should just do whatever it is and just make the mistakes and really learn. But I think if there is one mistake that you want to avoid is, I don't know, it sounds very funny, but to not avoid making mistakes.
Okay, just be very careful.
Yeah. I think no, actually, just to make mistake, like be very sort of like adventurous, to try different things out. When it comes to software, the biggest mistake someone can have is accepting the fact that once you learn it, you know it all.
Right.
That's completely untrue in software. There's always going to be like new technology, new platforms, and so what you really want to do is you want to make sure that you don't go in with the mindset that all you have to do is learn once and then you're just doing it over and over again. You have to really invest into continuous learning.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
That's true. Really good. Really good tip and example for people to be in the field. Always trying to learn for more.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So how can someone in this industry enhance their skills to grow and like further their career?
I think we live in a world where information is so easily available. Once you have a certain foundation, like in computer science, it's very easy to actually learn new things.
Right.
And a lot of things are just free online, Google. I think what you want to do is probably subscribe to certain mailing lists. For example, let's say you are a Python developer, right? You want to subscribe to a lot of Python, say, mailing lists. Or if let's say you have interest in like machine learning, data science, you want to subscribe to this mailing list so that on a maybe weekly basis, you get information about what's new, right? Then you just read through it just to know what's going on. But then if there's something that catches your eye, you should really just like, take some time, pick it up, build something around it.
Right.
So yeah, I think mailing list is a big thing to sort of keep yourself updated.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. So as we're nearing the end of the session, let's take a look at some of the questions we have from the audience. So check. So we have one question here. One from Naira. How do you think the rise in artificial intelligence can affect the computer science field in terms of employment?
Yeah. So computer science, basically, when we talk about artificial intelligence, is actually a subset of computer science. Computer science is just a very generic term to talk about software. AI ultimately is software. So I think what we'll see in the next 10, 20 years, things will shift. So maybe more companies will start hiring, computer scientists with a specialization in AI. And so when we talk about programming, there is, AI, and then there is like, programming more as we know it now. Programming as we know it now is very procedural. What I mean by that is we are basically writing instructions in a form of code so that computers will know what to do along the way. AI is different. AI is you're basically writing a piece of software that collects data, right? So that it knows what to do. So you're writing the algorithm that collects data, processes data, and then there's some level of like statistics involved. Basically, you're finding correlations and stuff like that, and so that computers can make their own interpretation of what's best to do. So that's kind of like AI. So I think the shift is really more on computer scientists with knowledge in AI, rather than just writing sets of instructions. Yeah.
So we have another question from Jen. What do you think is the future for Malaysia in the computer science field? Do we have our own Silicon Valley?
I think we're all trying,
Getting there.
Yeah, there are a lot of sort of like startups, just trying to take something, from an old industry, trying to make it better. I think it's inevitable for us to get, to a place where technology is more prevalent in everything that we do. So the potential is there, the opportunity is there. There's a good amount of company pursuing those efforts, and I think this is something that we may see 5-10 years time. But beyond just us setting up companies in Malaysia, there will always be companies like Facebook, companies like Google. Yes, they may be headquartered in like Silicon Valley, but they're always looking at different countries to establish like a base to hire, because they recognize that like there are good talent all over the world. So for example, Dell in Malaysia, they want to hire between 1,000 to 2,000 software developers in the next 2 years, I think, right? So that's a massive amount of demand from just one company. And to be honest, we don't have enough, even when we're talking about 1,000 to 2,000. Because the reality is a lot of people who study computer science, I think the statistics was only 3 out of 10 remain in computer science after 5 years. I think that's also true for many different sort of like areas. Whether it's engineering or psychologies, right? So like people actually don't always end up working in the field that they studied in.
You just tend to branch out along the way.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. So we have one last question from our audience. Her name is Nia. What's a good place to start if I'm interested in computer science?
So if you already have some background in computer science, okay, so this question is a bit tricky to answer because like I don't have enough context of who this person is, what age, what stage of life. So everyone is a bit different. If I'm talking to someone who is, maybe 17, 18, just finished SPM or high school, I would tell them if you have a remote interest in computer science, but the idea of computer science is still a bit vague to you, like you're not very sure what exactly is computer science. I know it's software, I know it's what. My suggestion is to get hands-on from day one. And so obviously, I'm from Next Academy, so I have to promote Next Academy, right? We have very short courses, right? So 2 weeks to 10 weeks long, full-time program. And our whole idea of this program is we take someone from being a beginner who may have seen or may not even have seen code, and at the end of 10 weeks, you are able to build your own applications. You want to build Facebook.com, you can. You want to build Instagram.com, you can. So a very short program to learn as much as possible. And then from there, you can sort of see, actually, this is pretty interesting. And then, you can go on and pursue like a computer science degree if you're interested. Or you can even, just work for maybe a year, 2 years, and then only decide to go back to a degree program if that's, what you choose to do. For someone who is older, let's say you already have a degree, my suggestion is you don't need a second degree. Like you don't have to spend another 4 years, going through college. You can look for short-term programs. So Next Academy has one. There are also many other players, in different countries. So those are good sort of avenues for you to discover your interests. And get going quickly.
So the best thing to just get your hands on it.
Get hands on. Whatever that means. It could be online learning or whatever.
Just try it.
Just try it.
So to wrap things up, do you have any parting words or advice for students who are looking to pursue a career in programming and computer science?
Any particular advice? I feel like I've given a lot of advice. But any generic ones? I think, back to the previous point, I think at the end of the day, whatever fields that you choose, you want to be good at it. But the reality is for us, all human beings, none of us are very different. We don't know if we can be good at something without actually trying. So I think my advice is more generic in that sense. It doesn't necessarily apply to computer scientists, but what you want to do is, take that step. Like you don't have to fear, just be bold, just give it a shot. Try, look for the shortest, cheapest way you can get started doing something, and then from there you can discover whether you have the interest and the ability to do it.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Thanks.
So there you have it, folks. Thank you for joining our conversation with Mr. Tang and about making money with skills in programming. We hope you have gained a lot of insights on what you want to pursue and how you could go about with it. So do come back for more for webinars and have a good day. Thank you.